Hey everybody, welcome back. It's Brian Fleischman again. It's been a little while. Thanks for joining me today as we start our Minesweeper project. I went ahead and banged out a version of Minesweeper last night just to make sure I could. So here's a little example of what it might look like when we do finish. It works pretty much just like Minesweeper. It has like a high score. That's my best time so far. You can flag spots so that you don't click on them on accident. You can lose, you can reset the game at any time. It has a timer. I mean, it functions pretty much just like Minesweeper. One thing I will say, though, is that it doesn't work great when you share and then it goes to the full screen version. So maybe we can try to debug that along the way. We can do some live debugging and figure out why it's not working quite as well when you share it. But it should be pretty much a pretty good clone of Minesweeper today. So I'll just play a little bit so you can see like stuff like that happens. And that algorithm, by the way, that goes and fills in these empty spaces. When that happens, I'll show you how to code that. But for a lot of you who are taking AP Computer Science Principles, this concept of doing that is going to kind of blow your mind probably a little bit. And we'll cover that when we get there. Other than that, I hope you learn a lot throughout this process. Let's get started. What do you say? Okay. All right, I'm going to go ahead and start a new one. Create a new applet. Come with me now. Okay, so it goes without saying, please do not use this for your AP portfolio project. It would be plagiarism, but hopefully it gives you some confidence that you can implement your own idea for your portfolio project. Just wanted to go ahead and cover my bases there. No plagiarism allowed, please. So let's have some fun with this thing. All right, so you may be wondering, what were those little boxes that I was clicking? Okay, actually what those were these little labels. Okay, so there was a whole bunch of them, right? So I was not patient enough to go place little tiny boxes like this big all around the screen one by one, hundreds of them side by side, perfectly placed. So we're not going to do that. But at least you know what you were looking at was text labels. They were labels. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to generate that board with an algorithm. We're going to create those labels on the fly and place them in the board as we saw them. Okay, so let's go ahead and give this a try. Let's go. All right, so I'm going to make a function real quick. This is a really common thing you might see. I'm going to make a function called init. Right? Init is kind of shorthand for initialize. Right? So when the program runs, it'll run the initialize function. So this is kind of common in a lot of programs. This is the initialize function. And in here, we're going to kind of be able to generate that grid of text labels and place them where we want them and do all kinds of cool stuff with the beginning of the game, including the timer. But for now, let's focus on that grid of boxes. Okay, so let's take a look. All right, what do you say? Okay, so this is going to be a nice nested for loop structure. Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to start on row 0. So var will be row 0. And row 0 will be the top. Var row equals 0, pardon me. And row is going to be less than, so let's do some calculation here. I think I found out that the best size for those boxes is like a 20 by 20 box, right? And if I start right here at 50, when y is 50, where's y is 50? I'm looking for it right here. So if we start our boxes right about here, there's enough room for, let's see, from 50, do you see my y position I'm looking at? All the way to 450. There's enough room for 20 rows, right? So we know that there's going to be 20 rows. So row less than 20, row plus plus. So I want 20 rows of boxes. Inside each row, I would like to repeatedly create boxes within a column, right? So I would like column to be 0 at the beginning. That's the far left. And remember, these boxes are 20 by 20. So I'm looking at my X position here. How many columns will I be able to fit in 320 pixels? 320 divide by 20, that gets me 16. So there's going to be 16 columns of boxes. All right, and then at the end of each loop, column plus plus. Very good. All right. So this is a nested for loop structure, very common in computer science, especially if you're going to deal with grids. All right. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to create a box here. Create a box. So I don't know what that's going to look like, but each of these boxes is going to have to be distinguishable in some way. Like their ID is going to have to be different. So I guess their ID that is associated with these boxes should have to do with where they are, which row they're in and which column. So that's unique to each box, like a coordinate, right? So row 5, column 7 or whatever is a different box than row 10, column 4 or whatever, right? So I think the only information that I would need to provide to this create box function, which I have not yet designed, is the row and the column, right? So let's go ahead and pass that in and say, all right, let's create a box. Okay, so I'm going to create a box for each row and column. All right, so now would be a good time. Let's see what this yellow thing's yelling at us. Create box hasn't been declared yet. Okay, yeah, because I haven't made the function. So let's go down and make that function real quick. Now, there's a good reason, I think, to make this create box function outside here. All right, so this is that idea that maybe your computer science teacher has been telling you about, this idea of abstraction. Like, how much do I really need to know about what goes on? Create box. Okay, I get it, right? But if you really want to know more, you have to go down to the function, right? So you're hiding some of the complexities of what it is to create a box for the sake of readability, right? So that's maybe what your computer science teacher has been working with you on. So we want to create a box. What does it mean to create a box? Let's see. So it does need an ID. So when I make this box, it needs an ID. So let's do it like this. So let's say var ID. Oh yeah, by the way, didn't I forget my parameters? I did. So I know that a row and column are going to be coming in when I create a box. Why do you yell? Why you yell? Oh, okay. I'm not worried about that yet because I'm not done writing my line of code. Var ID. Var ID. I want it to be like row dash call. Like for example, I want it to be like if it's row 10, column 4, I want it to be like 10-4. So here's how I do it. It's going to be row plus a dash plus a call. Right? So that would work. So if I'm in row 10, column 4, it will just create this ID like 10-4. Okay? So then I think it would probably be good to make the box, right? So I don't know if you knew this in AppLab, but do you see this like UI control text label, right? So I want to make this thing. So if you call this function text label, it creates a text label on the screen displaying the text that you provide and a default location. Okay, the default location is probably going to need to fix, but at least we're going to create this text label. We'll position it later. So what ID would so do you remember here, if we say text label, it says, what ID would you like to give it? Well, I just calculated that in the line above. It's ID. It's going to be different for each box, right? So let me make sure this ID that we calculated is going to be the ID of the one we create. The next parameter is what text would you like in it? Nothing, I guess, at the beginning, right? I don't want anything in there. So how about that? Okay. So now that I have the text label, there's a whole bunch of stuff that I want to do to it, right? So if you can imagine right now, all it is it makes a text label with nothing in it up here in this upper corner, and it's probably like this, and it says like text or something. Well, actually, it says nothing. It's just this tiny little text label with nothing in it. Now a couple of things I need to do are let's see, all kinds of stuff. I need to set its position. I need to kind of give it a color and stuff like that. So let's go ahead. Let's get after it. One thing I know I want on this box is a border, right? So let's do this. Let's set property. Set property of what? Well, it's the ID, whatever I'm doing. So this ID, right? I want to set property of the ID that I calculated, which might be like 10-4 or whatever. The property, I would like a border. Let's set the border color to black. How about that? So it has a border now. I also want to set the property of this particular ID. I would like the border width, so I'm going to need to specify that it's like a tiny little border, like of 1 pixel. How about that? Yeah, I'm actually going to move down a little bit so you guys can see a little bit more. Zoom in maybe. Okay. So I have a little border. So I have not yet done a lot of things. I haven't like set the size or the position or anything, right? So how about this? Let's set its position. Ooh, okay. So this is going to be a little crazy. Okay. So think about it this way. The position of this thing is going to totally depend on what row and what column it's in. Okay. So let's just visualize this real quick. I want the first row all to have Y values starting at 50, right? So I want the first box to be right here where my mouse is. That's going to be kind of, so everything in row 0 is going to have a Y position of 50. Everything in the next row should have a Y position of 70, which is 20 lower, right? So every row I go, whatever row I'm on, it's like 20 more than the one before. And same with the X's, but it's going to be 20 more than the one before, but in the horizontal direction. So let's try this. Let's set position. How about this? Set position of what? Well, of ID. That's the thing I've been calculating, making. What's the X position? Well, it kind of depends on what column I'm in, right? If I'm in column 0, I want to be right at 0. If I'm at column 1, I want to be at 20. If I'm in column 2, I want to be at 40, right? Do you see what's going on here? I'm basically taking the column and multiplying it by 20. Wouldn't you agree? Right? So I want to take the column times 20. That'll put it in the right spot horizontally. Similarly, for the Y position, I want to start at 50. That's the minimum. And then I might want to add on, remember, because the boxes begin like right here. I want to add on the row times 20. Right? So if I'm in, say, the 0th row, 0 times 20 will be 0, right? So it's just going to be at height 50. And as soon as row starts changing, it'll place the box a little bit lower down on the screen, right? In increments of 20, depending on the row. So now I feel like I've put these boxes in the correct position. Column times 20, that'll make a box. They'll jump by 20 each time I make one. 50 times row plus 20. That should work. It's going to be 50 initially, and then it's going to grow by 20 for each row. Okay, and then how about this? I can optionally provide a width and height for the box. So that's actually really handy. I know how big I want my boxes. I want them 20 by 20, don't I? So let's do that. So take a minute, pause the video, and make sure that you have these lines of code agreeing with mine, okay? And we'll continue. All right. We should be back now. There's more. There's still more to do, right? So right now, I wonder what's going to happen. Like right now, we should probably see something, right? I hope. Okay, there they are. That actually was pretty good. So they're white. Okay, so we should probably set the background color. And maybe we should kind of like, do you remember how in the game, like sometimes there would be font that shows up? We should probably make sure that font size looks good. So what I'm going to do is kind of give like a sample text here. Okay, that's not quite in the right place. So shouldn't I center this, right? I think I should probably center this. So let's do this. Let's work on the font for a second and the color. So how about this? Let's set property. Let's set the property of font size. So we'll see font. Let's see, is it in here in the drop down? Font size. I think 14. If I remember correctly, I had to experiment with this the first time I did it. 14 was a pretty good font size, and I also want to center it. So set property of ID text align, I believe it is. Yeah, there it is. So text align, center. All right, so that should look better. Let's see. That actually looks pretty good, right? So maybe 5 is the wrong number to go in all these boxes, but at least we know when text shows up in there that it's going to show up in a nice way. Okay, so let's go ahead and call that good. We should probably do a little bit of action here with the background color. Let's set the property of this background color. Let's make this thing look real good. Set property ID background color. And if you know anything about hexadecimal, there's like, you could do, so look at all these options. You have literal, string literals for colors, you have RGB values for colors, and you have hex options, right? So I'm going to use a hex option because I'm kind of a hex kind of person. Almost white, right? So all white would be all F, by the way. That's a maxing out RGs and Bs. I don't want fully white, nor do I want like gray. It's kind of like a sort of a light gray, so it's all D, so 6 Ds, okay? So I got that now working, and let's go ahead and see what this looks like. That looks pretty good, other than the fact that I don't want 5s there, right? So I don't want 5s in there anymore, so let's try this again. But look at that. There we go. That looks like a Minesweeper board. That's kind of what we're going for. That actually doesn't look bad at all. All right, so how much more can we do? Let's do one more thing. Let's create a box. And when we create a box, let's actually give it a chance to possibly be a bomb. And then after that, we'll probably call this video good, and we'll move on to part 2 in the next video. Okay? Let's see here. So here's the idea. Let's do it like this. Maybe, so when it creates the box, there's a chance that there's a bomb stored there. So instead of putting a bomb in the box, let's do this. Let's make a variable up here, bombs, and make it an empty list for now. And what we're going to do with this is we're going to store the IDs of the locations of bombs, and we can reference these locations later to see if we clicked on the bomb, for example. Okay, so now let's say that there's a chance here that there's a bomb. Oh, by the way, I put a semicolon here. If, watch this, if math.random, if you don't know what math.random does, it gives you a number between 0 and 0.99999. So if that happens to fall above, let's say, 0.85, so basically what I'm saying is if it goes from 0 to 0.9999, there's not a great chance that it's going to fall above 0.85, right? Approximately a 15% chance that it'll do so. Let's say if it does, let's add this particular ID to that bombs list. So do you remember like append item to what? To bombs. I'd like to append this current ID to the bombs list, right? And then how about this? After we've created all the boxes, let's make sure that this worked. Let's make sure that this making the bombs and appending this ID that I've calculated based on the row and column, it actually worked and got into the list. So I'm going to go up here into init, and after all these boxes are created in this loop over and over again, right here, let's check. Let's console.log. There are such and such bombs. And here, between these pluses, I'm going to put bombs.length. There you go. Let's see. Let's reset. Run. There are 41 bombs. It looks like it worked. Let's actually, just for fun, let's print the location of all the bombs. So console.log bombs. So you're going to be able to see how we. So here's the one weakness here. Do you see what happens in the way I'm designing this game? Sometimes you get fewer bombs, and sometimes you get more. Maybe we can fix that later, but I think the game is just fine. You know, it's fun the way it is. So you can see now that there's a bomb at 1,2, which is right there, I believe. 1,012 right there. There's a bomb right there. We've stored its ID, so later when we click the screen, we can say, hey, is that one of those IDs in the bombs? And we can like decide to blow up and end the game and so on. So far we have a board. It's all looking pretty good. The font size and all the styling is good for it. And there's even an array or a list of IDs that contain bombs. Okay, so I think that's a pretty good start. So let's actually call it good there. And we'll continue on in the next video for how to say detect a click, or like, I don't know, maybe we could put the smiley up here. I don't know. Or should we do the timer next? I don't know. Let's decide in the next video. We could do so many different things. We'll see how we're feeling. All right, thanks for tuning in to part 1. Come on back for part 2. Let's make Minesweeper.